Live from the Ken and Valerie Baker studio at WHYY, this is Studio 2.
On Monday, July 6th, welcome to the program, friends. I'm Cherry Gregg.
And I'm Avi Wolfman-Arndt.
So, Avi, 30, even 20 years ago, calling yourself a socialist, you were immediately greeted with skepticism, even suspicion, and in American politics, it was almost a political death sentence. Well, today, Democratic Socialists are winning congressional primaries. They're electing mayors. They're expanding their influence inside of the Democratic Party. They're forcing Democrats everywhere to answer a very difficult question. Is this the future of the party, or is it a path that could cost Democrats elections? So today on the show, we're talking with two Democrats who have opposing answers to that question. One proudly belongs to the Democratic Socialists of America. The other believes the party needs to stop the movement before it fundamentally changes what it means to be a Democrat. He's a centrist. So exactly what is democratic socialism, and can democratic socialists win anywhere besides in America's bluest cities? Those are our big questions today. And of course, we'd love to get your thoughts, you, the listener. What do you think about the rise of democratic socialists? Will it ultimately help or hurt the Democratic Party? Give us a call. The number is 888-477-9499. The email is studio2@whyy.org. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, hello. Hopefully you're dry after all that rain. And leave your comments in the live chat.
Wesley says the old Democratic Party is gone. Socialism is the future and the end of the Democratic Party. Interesting.
Wow. Interesting.
So join Wesley. Give us a call, 888-477-9499. Again, the email, studio2@whyy.org. But first, a trio of local news stories. Cherry, I'm starting us off.
All right.
Well, folks. It came and it went. The big 250 celebration in Philadelphia over the weekend. Let's talk about highlights and lowlights, Cherry. Highlights. Big, exciting FIFA match on the 4th. France beat Paraguay. That was pretty cool.
That was.
Well, actually, it was kind of hot. But either way, the Pope accepted a big prize from the Constitution Center, gave a virtual speech.
That was cool.
Yep. Yeah. There was a Ben Franklin lookalike contest. That was also cool. Kaya Burgess took home top prize. Here's what she told our newest producer, Ben Abrams.
Oh my gosh, so this actually originally was my costume for my Hamilton. I was Hamilton last year for Halloween. So this costume, I think I spent like 3 all-nighters on this.
Love to reuse a costume. Great work by Kaya Burgess. The lowlights were mostly weather-related. The Heat canceled a concert and a parade. The famous Big Boy train made a triumphant trip to the Navy Yard, but they had to cut the viewing session short because of the heat.
It was hot.
Yeah. Hot doesn't. We need another word for what it was.
No, we need it was scorching.
Scorching. Yes. There it is. Then on July 4th night, the big concert on the Parkway. Lots of buzz, lots of money spent. Then thunderstorms. They had to pause the concert for a while. The show did go on around 2:30 a.m. July 5th, they finally set those beautiful fireworks ablaze into the summer night sky. Cherry, you went to the concert on the Parkway.
Did.
You braved it. What were your thoughts?
So, first of all, honestly, it was hot, as you said, scorching.
It was hot.
But I had a ball. I mean, I got to see Seal, Adam Blackstone, Jill Scott. They were all amazing. And then we were evacuated.
That was rough.
It was rough. And it wasn't chaotic. I have to give them credit for that.
That's good.
But if I were to critique anything, the messaging seemed like, go to your car, get to shelter, go home. Not that it was a pause until much later. And by the time I got home, I wasn't coming back out. But I watched the big part of the concert.
But you enjoyed yourself when you were there.
I had a great time. I had a great time.
And that's what's important.
And the vibes were beautiful.
Great vibes. We love vibes. What do you think people will ultimately remember from the 250 weekend? You know, there's a lot of build up to this, right? Yeah. What do you think will be the lasting memory?
The concert was great. It was epic if you got to be there for the midnight concert. But I think, just the feeling that Philadelphia, people love Philadelphia. People love America. They came from all over the world. I think I'll never forget that.
Yeah, for me, I think it's going to be the soccer tournament.
Yeah.
And the several weeks of having it here, the Fan Fest in Lemon Hill, I did not expect to feel so swept up in it as I was. And I didn't even go to any of the games. But just seeing the scenes, seeing the people around the city, I think if you if you ask me, 50 years from now, what do you remember? I think it's going to be that. And it was for the exact reason you said, because it felt like people wanted to be here. They wanted to be in Philadelphia. It wasn't a stopover.
No.
It was a destination.
And I actually, I'm not a big soccer person, but I actually watched several games.
Oh, absolutely.
And it was so exciting. So, I think we all got, swept up in it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Story number 2.
Yeah, and since we've been talking about the 4th of July, a bit of history was made this Independence Day when PICO workers went on strike for the very first time in the 145-year history of that utility. Roughly 1,600 unionized workers, including engineering techs, workers in automation, customer services, facilities, linemen, they all decided to strike beginning at midnight Saturday after contract negotiations collapse. The workers are represented by the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, IBEW, Local 614. The contract between PICO and IBEW actually expired in March, but they have been negotiating back and forth. And IBEW argues that PICO workers earn 30% less than their counterparts at nearby comparable companies. They're also calling for about 600 workers hired after 2021 to get access to pension and some health care benefits. And the union points to the, record profits of PICO. They're like, look, you guys made $814 million last year. The CEO of the parent company got $24 million plus stock options in his compensation. And they're like, we want some of that profit. The company offered, I guess, 20% over the next 5 years and some benefits, but the union said that is not enough. And, we just had a torrential rain this week, over the weekend, a lot of heat. There have been power outages, and I think people are going to start to feel it. These workers are vital at this time during the year.
And I was just shocked to read that they've never been on strike. I mean, there's so many strikes and so many public public-private sector unions, and I've never. So this is truly historic, and obviously we all hope that it's worked out sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. And it's going to get sticky because, unions tend to stick together. So you got union workers from utilities in nearby states, and they're telling them, don't cross the line. Yeah. So
apparently they're at the table today. I think they were supposed to start meeting today around 10 o'clock. So hopefully those meetings are going well. Finally, third story here. So there's a prominent mural in the Point Breeze section of South Philadelphia that was painted by the famous artist Keith Haring. There it is right there. Yeah. Beautiful mural, by the way.
Gorgeous, yeah.
Painted in 1987 in collaboration with area teenagers for the bicentennial of the U.S. Constitution. It's called We the Youth. And now there's actually a debate over whether it should be designated for historic preservation. Really interesting story by WHYY's Aaron Moselle about this mural, which is on the side of a row home, just a random row home, really, at 22nd and Ellsworth. The mural was actually in the past already fading and crumbling. Back in 2013, Cherry, they fixed it up. The homeowners reached out to a foundation. They got some money. They fixed it up. And now someone recently applied for this mural, again by Keith Haring, a big artist.
Yeah, pretty well known.
To protect the mural as a historically significant object. And the Philly Historical Commission is going to meet later this month to consider that application and that designation.
Yeah.
Now, I thought this was interesting. The executive director of the Preservation Alliance of Greater Philadelphia does not sound supportive of that submission.
Yeah.
He told WHYY, quote, "Murals have always been understood to be temporary interventions. We are not sure that historic designation is the right approach to balance mural preservation with the overall best interests of the city."
And I can see that argument, and I say this as someone who covered mural arts. The murals coming up all over. I mean, the Anti-Graffiti Network, the original mission was to combat graffiti and vandalism, right? And murals go up and down all the time. A new person buys the house. They own the property, the wall with the mural. They're allowed to change it. It is their property. And so you start opening up a whole can of worms. Potentially, if you start telling people that this is your wall or the garden next door, you can't do more with that property. And so I think it's a slippery slope. And this mural was only made, in the 80s. It's not like it's 200 years old or something like that. So the question remains, like, where will the line be? How many murals could be protected? How many homeowners or property owners could be impacted? Because right now, people can sort of go ahead if they want to change that. They're allowed to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would imagine as a test case, this is an important one because if you're not going to preserve this mural by
Then
a
which
truly
ones? Yeah.
well-known artist, I mean, Keith Haring's one of the few artists that even a layperson like me, I can see a Keith Haring work and be like, that's Keith Haring.
Yeah.
Like, there's very few artists who are at that level. So if this one is not set to be preserved, you would imagine almost all other murals would be, subject to the whims of the homeowners, essentially.
Yeah, and if it is protected, then the question is, where's the line?
Exactly.
So
I thought it was an interesting story. Check it out on WHYY.org. And also stay with us here on Studio 2. We're asking you, what do you think about the rise of Democratic Socialists? They've been racking up some big wins recently. We'll talk about it on Studio 2.
welcome back to Studio 2 here on WHYY. I'm Cherry Gregg.
I'm Avi Wolfman-Arent. There is no denying that Democratic Socialist candidates have racked up some big wins. Right here in Pennsylvania with State Rep Chris Rabb's primary victory for the 3rd Congressional District, as well as New York, California, and Colorado.
But that has caused concern among more moderate Democrats who worry their positions are too far left and will alienate voters in the center ahead of midterms. Here's Colorado's Maylot Quiros at her victory speech after she knocked out a 30-year incumbent.
We will not wait to put an end to the politics of the past, to get big money out of our politics, and to reject corporate PACs and AIPAC. And no, we will not wait to end the genocide in Palestine.
Now, many Republicans are trying to brand these candidates as extreme and label them communists, just as President Trump did in speeches over the July 4th weekend.
Ever since the entire world has been on notice that Americans will never let anyone take our freedom away. Won't happen. And all these talks from the communists, they haven't got a chance. Not even a chance. We don't want communists in our country.
So today, will the Republican messaging work? Is the D.S.A. too far left for the majority of Americans, or has the movement tapped into an energy and frustration with the status quo? Today, we're joined by two guests with different views on this, and let me introduce them. We have Nikhil Saval, who represents Pennsylvania's 1st Senatorial District in Philadelphia, and he is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. Nikhil, welcome to Studio 2. Welcome back to Studio
Thanks, Cherry.
2.
Thanks, Avi. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we also have Matt Bennett. He's co-founder and executive vice president of public affairs for Third Way, an advocacy organization that champions moderate policy and centrist ideas. Matt, welcome to Studio 2.
Thanks for having me.
And of course, we'd love to hear from you listening out there. Do you think the rise of Democratic Socialists will ultimately help or hurt the Democratic Party? We'd love your thoughts. Our number is 888-477-9499. Our email is studio2@whyy.org. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, drop a comment in the live chat.
And so we want to level set for a moment, Nikhil. So Merriam-Webster defines democratic socialism as creating a decentralized socialist economic system within a democratic political system. That's the definition. I know you're a member of the D.S.A. From your perspective, what is democratic socialism from your perspective, and what does it stand for in practice?
So thank you again, and it's an honor to be here with you and with Matt. So democratic socialism is fundamentally about dignity. It's about dignity for working class people, and we believe that the way to attain that dignity is to extend the democracy that we have, the franchise that we have, and the ideas of democracy from beyond just the ballot box. We believe that democracy should be operative in so many different parts of our lives. Democracy should be in the workplace. Democracy should be in how we govern our economy. Democracy is, and that's one way to ensure that there's more control and there's more buy-in and more equality across our society. We have one of the grossest levels of wealth inequality in decades in the United States. We have a rank level of corruption, not just in our presidency, but across our elections. And we have a lot of people who are saying no to this. People who are saying no to the idea that you can just be fired at will and your bosses can determine when you pee at work or not. People who say, we're saying no to the idea that your landlord can just gouge you and raise your rent by 10s, 50, 100% and kick you out of your apartment at will. And so many other policies where people feel that there's no control over their lives. They want control. They want democratic participation. And we've seen that operative in different ways in different countries. And I think people want to see those policies enacted here in the United States.
Now, Matt, I'm sure you would have a slightly different framing of D.S.A., but before we get into sort of the debate about what D.S.A. is and exactly what they stand for from your perspective, I do think one thing that I would imagine we all agree on is that Democratic Socialists have won some pretty interesting and important elections recently. And I'll read this comment from Sean. I voted Democrat my entire adult life, but I no longer trust the DNC. They severely underestimated Bernie, even worked against him. I'm a Democratic Socialist. I think it's the future. Mamdani, talking about the mayor of New York, is proof that this is the popular way forward. We mentioned already Daria Liza Avila Chevalier in New York, Claire Valdez in New York, Chris Rabb here in Philadelphia, Melat Kiros in Colorado, Janice Lewis George in D.C., just naming some of the Democratic Socialist wins recently. Matt, why do you think D.S.A. members and D.S.A.-aligned candidates are winning these races?
Well, first of all, I think, I think people like Mayor Mamdani and Nikhil do an amazingly good job of putting a fresh and very attractive face on democratic socialism. Everything that Nikhil just said, I pretty much agree with. I'm a Democrat. I'm certainly not a democratic socialist. But unfortunately, that isn't what the D.S.A. itself stands for. And you don't have to believe me. It's not the dictionary definition of what a small d, small s democratic socialist is that we're talking about. It's the big D, big S, big A definition of what that group, they're not a political party, but what that group stands for. And there's a platform that is being prepared. There's one that's already been published. They're updating it. And it's pretty clear if you look at that platform, what they're for. And it goes way beyond what Nikhil just talked about, way beyond what Mayor Mamdani is doing. And it goes to things that people like Avila Chevalier, who is almost certain to be a member of Congress from New York, talked about in her tweets only a few years ago. And that is, for example, ending the carceral forces of the state, which is to say, letting everyone out of prison. And she was asked about this recently, should murderers be let out of prison? And she essentially said yes. And it means open borders, and it means nationalizing industry.
But if that is the case, Matt, because I know that's going to get us into a conversation back and forth about what D.S.A. is and what their platform is. But right. I do want to get into that question of why you think they have won. You mentioned Nikhil and you mentioned Zohran Mamdani saying that they're very persuasive politicians. You're just saying that that essentially people who are good at politics happen to be running on the D.S.A. platform. It's nothing about their ideas that might be galvanizing.
Well, I think there's two things. One is they have attracted some very good candidates. I mean, that's just undeniably the case. But also, the places where they've won, in Philadelphia, New York, and Colorado are incredibly deep blue places. And they've won with very low turnout elections. So for just an example, the district that they won in Denver, that went for Kamala Harris by 57 points against Trump. The districts in New York have a partisan voter index of D plus 36. I mean, there are basically no Republicans in these districts. And the people that live there tend to be young, fairly well educated. The people that vote in these districts and the people that voted for those candidates were younger, more educated, and whiter than the rest of the district. The Hispanic and Black districts of New York voted against the two D.S.A. candidates. The majority of those precincts voted for the other candidates in those elections. So you have a kind of a very small turnout. 66,000 people voted in the two New York elections versus 118,000 that voted for Nikema Williams, a congresswoman from Georgia, who basically had no opponent. So these are low turnout elections in June when only the most activated people are voting. But I will say this, there is no question that Democratic voters are apoplectic. They are incredibly angry. They're angry for some of the reasons that we've already discussed, and they're angry because Trump is the worst president in American history and he's destroying everything that we all care about. So that anger, which is righteous and real, is driving them to kind of throw the bums out. So there's a lot of anger at members of Congress, some of whom have been there too long, like Diana DeGette in Colorado, some of whom are not as attractive candidates as the ones they're running against. But I think there's a whole host of reasons.
And Matt, I want to read this comment. Tariq says, if they aren't the future of the Dems, then the Dems have no future. The ball's in the establishment's court. And so, Nikhil, I want to give you a chance to respond to what Matt had to say, just about D.S.A. And also just, I'd like to get your thoughts. I mean, some folks have even said, Jane writes, I think Democratic Socialists should call themselves liberal Democrats because as a lifelong liberal Democrat, I think their policy proposals align with liberal Democrats. To use the word socialist plays into Trump's lies about radical left-wing lunatics, and working people won't see their policies will be helping working families. Just your thoughts on those two ideas and your response to what Matt had to say. Is it fair to say like some of the ideas that are on the far left part of the party are ideas that most D.S.A. members also subscribe to?
Well, first of all, I think we should note, I mean, Matt mentioned where Democratic Socialists have won, but we should also note where, Democratic Socialists, and they have won there, and that's voters choosing their elected officials. So we're talking about actual voters. And, in many of these areas, young people turned out in huge numbers. We are changing the electorate in that way, where D.S.A. candidates are winning younger voters, getting younger people out to vote. The truth is, across race, across income levels, if you were a younger voter, you tended to vote for Claire Valdez, let's say, or Daria Lisa Chevalier, or Chris Rabb or Millet Quiros. But the other thing I would say is that Democratic Socialist politicians are among the most popular politicians in the country. In a recent poll, among the top 3 most popular politicians in the United States were Bernie Sanders and Zoran Mamdani. And the reason isn't just that they are attractive or I'm not sure what that characterization exactly means that Matt is suggesting. It's that they are proposing things that people feel would make a real material difference in their lives. And not only are they not just proposing those things, they're actually winning and delivering on some of them, whether that's universal 2K in New York or the popular rent freeze proposal that just went into effect also in New York City. On the federal level, people are really supportive of Medicare for all. They're supportive of some of the affordable housing policies. Here in Pennsylvania, we've delivered policies that actually change people's lives. One of them is the Whole Home Repairs Program, which I proposed in 2022, was adopted by a Republican majority legislature and provides grants to low-income homeowners across Pennsylvania, has helped repair and stabilize 4,000 homes and lower utility bills, and helps keep elderly residents in their homes in rural, urban, and suburban areas, regardless of party, regardless of geography, regardless of political affiliation. And now that policy is been taken to a federal level. It is part of the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. It was proposed by Republicans and Democrats and was voted in overwhelmingly and is awaiting the president's signature. So these are the policies that we're running on and winning, and they're delivering for people.
Yeah.
And I think people see that and they want more of it.
But you have to agree in some regard to what Matt had to say. I mean, you do represent a very blue district. Chris Rabb won in one of the bluest districts in the country. New York, heavily Democrat. I mean, these are D.C., very Democrat. So how will this work outside of deep blue areas and purple districts, for example, Bucks County?
Well, so you see Democratic Socialists winning in rural and suburban areas as well, in purple areas as well. Christian Phelps, just to choose one example, who is a 31-year-old state house candidate in Wisconsin, won in a rural area of Wisconsin, recently won a primary narrowly and won in the general election overwhelmingly in a Trump district. But at a broader level, candidates, progressive candidates, socialist candidates running for federal office are polling well ahead of their Republican opponents in the general election. Abdul El-Sayed, who may very well be the nominee in Michigan, or Francesca Hong, nominee for Senate, U.S. Senate, or Francesca Hong, who is a D.S.A. candidate running for governor of Wisconsin, polling ahead in the most recent poll and polling ahead of her Republican general election opponent. Again, you find that, and when you find what people are responding to, you find that candidates like Francesca, for example, are taking on issues in ways that neither establishment Democrats, corporate Democrats, or Republicans are. For example, when it comes to artificial intelligence, the presence of data centers in their communities, she's taking on these fights in a way that other people are not, and people are responding to them.
Let me just, some comments here. Jeff says the D.S.A. is unwittingly feeding absolutely priceless disinformation to the GOP attack machine. There is no greater boogeyman in U.S. history than the radical left. Charles says they're Democrats, but the term socialist in this country in most democracies is seen as a dog whistle for communists. Why embrace that specific term, socialist? Because we had a commenter earlier saying, just call it liberal Democrats. Like, you're hurting yourself by embracing that term. I would imagine you're going to turn around and say, that's part of the energy here. It is specifically associated with using that term, socialist. So please help me help me understand from your perspective why you embrace that specific word in your politics.
Socialism accurately identifies the policies and the vision of the world that we want to see. But I think what we're trying to point out is a lot of the policies that people find popular in the United States also came out of socialist organizing in American history. Many of the major civil rights organizers in the United States.
So it's a question of accuracy, not a question of, because that's the... No,
I'm sorry.
They're saying as a matter of strategy, don't use that word. Just don't use it because it's going to hurt you. Are you saying, well, but this is what I believe and I want to use that word? Or you think there is a strategic purpose to using that word? I think is what I'm trying to drive at here.
Well, people like integrity. People like running on their beliefs and speaking to their beliefs. This is a tradition and a vision we come out of, a vision we espouse, and it is consistent with some of the great things that we actually have achieved in American history, and consistent with a lot of the great American traditions, the Black radical tradition, the labor movement, so much of it inflected and carried by American socialists, and we're continuing that tradition and continuing to build on it.
So, Nikhil, why not just start another party? Like the Working Families Party, they're progressive. They've won here in Philadelphia. They've been getting seats in other states as well. Why not just start another party versus glomming onto the Democratic Party?
Well, I want to say one thing. Is that this is the United States fundamentally is a two-party system, right? Mm-hmm. And so all of us find ourselves operating one way or the other in one or the other party. And we are not only trying to change conditions in the Democratic Party and change what the Democratic Party fights for. We are also fighting for the Democratic Party to win in more places. I am the Pennsylvania Senate. I'm fighting for a Democratic majority in the Pennsylvania Senate this fall. That's my main goal. I hope that we win a Democratic trifecta. I think we can do incredible things with that trifecta, and I hope we can enact some of the policies that we are talking about because, again, I think that they're popular.
So the D.S.A. is basically working in the system that America has, which is a two-party system.
Yeah, we're trying to win.
Yeah,
We're trying to win a majority here.
Let me read this comment from Jackie in media. I don't know why the Democrats have to be just one thing. Let's lean into the big tent idea. Invite everyone who has democratic ideals in. The party and country is stronger when there are a multitude of ideas being discussed and compromised. So Matt, what's the downside here? Because a lot of people in the comments are even saying this, like, we saw the Republican Party swing hard to the right, Tea Party followed by Trump. They've got a trifecta at the federal level now, essentially. What's the downside to embracing this enthusiasm around democratic socialism?
Look, I think extreme factions inside parties can be a real downside. And I think while it is true that Trump now has a trifecta, the Tea Party, when it first came on the scene, cost Republicans 6 winnable Senate seats. 6. I mean, that's a lot. And that's a lot of political power that they just gave away, because the people that they nominated for those seats in in pretty red states in some cases, like Missouri and Montana, were just way too radical, and that ended up really hurting them. So I do worry about extreme factions inside the party. The second thing is, it's important to emphasize that the Democratic Socialists of America, there's a big faction of them, and they've been very clear about this, that want to completely change the Democratic Party and then basically kill it off. It's called the dirty break. There was a big article about this that came out in 2017 in Jacobin magazine. They're very clear that their mission is to take over the party, and I am not interested in a radical faction taking over my party. And then the final thing I'll say, and it goes to the point that Cherry made about the policies that we've been talking about. Many of them are perfectly reasonable, almost all of them. The housing policy, all of that would be solid Democratic policymaking, and it's just liberal Democratic policymaking. Unfortunately, though, by being a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, and again, that is a proper name. That isn't a descriptor. That is a name of a faction. You're taking on baggage that is incredibly heavy to bear in places that are not very deep blue.
What do you see as the biggest baggage that's in the platform? Because we're going to have to dig into this at some point in the conversation. When you look at what's actually spelled out, and you can go on their website, look it up, what the D.S.A. stands for, some of their policy positions, are there one or two, Matt, that you say, this is the thing that creates the biggest liability for the Democrats?
Some of them are like a parody of what a Republican ad maker would want Democrats to be for. I've already mentioned releasing everyone from prison, eliminating borders, eliminating the Department of Defense, and socializing all industry. And there's more. I mean, They have said really good things about Maduro's regime in Venezuela, and about Cuba, and about the Chinese Communist Party. Any of that can be weaponized against Democrats very easily.
Before we get to the break, I just want to read this from the D.S.A. platform. It says, this capitalist economic system is the cause of violence, unemployment, and a climate crisis that poses an existential threat to life on Earth. That's a quote from the platform document. I mean, is it fundamentally an anti-capitalist movement, Senator Saval? And is that the ultimate goal, to sort of take over the Democratic Party and create some sort of alternative system to the system of capitalism?
So I represent a district of 250,000 people. It's 40% non-white. It is the constituents have reelected me to office. It's in 2024, and a huge majority, a number of my constituents do not see the system working for them. Mm-hmm. They come into my office, they are unable to find housing. They see their healthcare being taken away, and it will be their worse is yet to come. They see the United States supercharging immigration enforcement, with billions and billions of dollars. ICE and CBP are now larger than the budgets of many small nations. They see politicians of both parties sending dollars overseas to fight illegal, catastrophic wars, and they see nothing coming home for them. This is the system that they oppose. This is the system that we oppose, and we want to change it, and we want to transform it.
Does that mean anti-capitalism, though, essentially? Because that's a different, to say these are the byproducts of capitalism, we oppose them and we intend to fix them, versus we need to replace this economic system with some other entirely different economic system.
we definitely think that the system needs to be transformed and changed. And the system that we see would have more democratic control in workplaces. We would have more democratic control over housing and the economy. I mean, all of those things are consistent with a socialist vision of how the economy and society would function. And again, Democratic Socialists, there are 250 of us representing millions of people across the United States. People have been supporting that vision. A majority of Democrats support that vision.
And before we go to break, I want to bring in a caller, and I want to read a couple comments because Elizabeth from Media says the Democratic Party is dead in the water, and the only thing breathing any life into them is the incredibly worse Republicans. Corporate Dems have made enough money now, and it's time for them to step down and get out of the way. And please take Fetterman with you. I want to bring in Mike from Philadelphia, who's on the line. Mike, you're on Studio 2. What's your question or comment?
Yeah, shoot. I guess the main thing is I kind of heard someone trying to say, well, the Democratic Socialists, they won because there was low turnout. And to me, okay, you centrist Democrats and Bob Brady have had like 20 years to get a turnout. When are you going to get that turnout? In the meantime, the only excitement on the horizon is Democratic Socialists. And, I mean, the others, they keep trying to paint the D.S.A. as too weird and too out there. And I got to say, you know, I grew up as kind of a square. I've run a bike shop for 20 plus years. And I used to say, well, I don't know about this guy with the tattoos. And somebody said, let the guy work. People like him. And then now, in the last years of the shop, there were people with all kinds of piercings and all kinds of tattoos. And the lawyers who were coming in to buy bikes had piercings and tattoos. The window has shifted. Nobody pays attention to that stuff. The people that ride Harleys are corporate, you know, like you gotta see the trying to paint the symbol and to say, well, we had to throw trans people and people can be gay, but they can't be queer. They got to be just too straight. Yeah. Otherwise we can't have them on board. And it has to be okay to shoot a couple of black people once in a while. No, that's not weird. It's American to want everybody to have a shot, you know?
And then, Mike, we got to go to break, but that's Mike from Philadelphia. And on the other side of the break, I have questions on whether or not the D.S.A. is really just pushing Democrats to come up with a better platform. And we'll talk about that. We'll expand the conversation. We'll hear from more callers and commenters. You're listening to Studio 2. We'll be right back after the break. And welcome back to Studio 2 here on WHYY. I'm Cherry Gregg.
I'm Avi Wolfman-Arent. We're talking about the victories that Democratic Socialist candidates are racking up and what it means for the direction of the Democratic Party. Some worry it will alienate more moderate voters. Others say it will energize a new coalition. We've got two guests with us with different views. Let me reintroduce them. Nikhil Saval represents Pennsylvania's 1st Senatorial District in Philadelphia and is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. Matt Bennett is co-founder and executive vice president of public affairs for Third Way. which is an organization that advocates for more moderate policy positions.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear from you, our listeners. Do you think the rise of Democratic Socialists will ultimately help or hurt the Democratic Party? You can give us a call, 888-477-9499. The email is studio2@whyy.org. And for our YouTube and Facebookers, keep those comments coming in the live chat. Look a Bear on YouTube says, we swung way to the right, willing to swing way to the left. Honestly, how much worse could it get? Giving people health care, child care, taxing the rich. Yeah, it sounds terrible. And Matt, I sort of teased this on the other side of the break, but should Democrats, centrist Democrats, is the answer to just come up with better messaging? When you hear some of the D.S.A. candidates, they come out swinging. It doesn't sound bad if you live in New York to talk about universal child care. It doesn't sound bad to have, rent frozen for a while when you see rent consistently going up. What are the Democrats sort of coming up with to sort of energize voters, to get people interested again in in their platform?
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to remember what we're talking about here. So far, Nikhil mentioned some general election candidates that won down ballot races elsewhere, and that's true. But for the most part, what we're discussing are primary campaigns where Democrats are running against other Democrats, mostly in very, very blue places. The thing that we worry about, the energizing that we think needs to happen, is to the general electorate. What we are about is trying to build majorities to beat Republicans, take power away from Trump and the MAGA movement, and to return it to the Democrats. And what we really are concerned about is the weaponization of some of the more extreme ideas that we talked about before the break by Republicans in the general election. I agree that some centrist Democrats have run some terrible campaigns with no vision whatsoever in some high-profile places, like in the New York mayor's race. There is no question. But the same night that Zohran Mamdani won the mayor's race, Mikey Sherrill won the governorship in New Jersey, and Abigail Spanberger won in Virginia. And between them, they had exactly 0 viral moments during their campaign. But despite that, they won by 17 and 15 percentage points, respectively. And their turnout relative to 2024 was higher than Mamdani's in New York City. So the idea that only the radical left, only the D.S.A. can excite voters is simply false, especially when you look at the elections that really matter, the ones where we're running against Republicans.
Let me read this comment from Raphael in Philadelphia. People are turning to democratic socialism because they've seen decades of failure from the establishment. That's why people like me are turning to D.S.A. candidates. Comment from Sean, who says, Matt, talking about Matt Bennett, our guest, is throwing around this term radical like Donald Trump does. Democratic socialism isn't radical. It works elsewhere in the world in healthy, happy countries. Moderate Democrats have nothing exciting or effective to offer. We tried Hillary and Kamala with no luck. We need bold, popular ideas. Sean pointed to this idea of other countries. And the ones that I hear thrown around the most as models, I suppose, would be some of the Nordic countries, Northern European countries. Denmark comes to the top of the list often. Is that the goal, Senator Saval? Is that what we're driving toward? Because I could understand that as a model, but I would also imagine most people would classify Denmark as working in a capitalist system. It's a capitalist country, I think. Is that the direction you'd like to take it? Is it different than that? Is there something in the world that exists that you can compare to your vision for what America would be?
I think there are different aspects of what we're looking for in countries all over the place, but they're also here in the United States. So of course, many of us want a national health insurance, a single payer healthcare model. Most Americans do. Many of us want and that's operative in a number of European countries. Many of us want more collective provision of housing. You see that in countries throughout Europe. You also see that in Singapore, for example. Many of us want free college. You see that in a number of different places around the world. There's so many different countries that offer this, but also there are places in the United States, there are places in recent U.S. history where this was operative. Yeah. In California, you were able to go to college for free or basically free until the last 30 or 40 years. Mm-hmm. In many places, and get one of the highest quality educations in the world. In of course, in New York City, they've been able, and in Washington, D.C. and other places, they've been able to adopt universal pre-K, universal 3K. This is something that's hugely popular around the country, and we can adopt them in more places. So this is deep in the American grain. Again, the socialist history of the United States, the history of activists and organizers who come out of socialist organizing is everywhere. And people were fighting for visions of this throughout American history. And we are continuing that tradition.
Yeah. But there would be a difference, right, between someone saying, I like some of their ideas and I like some of the policies that their movement has produced versus I agree with their ultimate vision for what they want society to look like. We had a commenter, Luann, who brought up, like, I like the idea of regulated capitalism. I think totalitarian Marxist states are failed states, and I'm scared of that. I'm just trying to locate the D.S.A.'s vision between those two poles, I guess. Like, what, besides the fact that there are some good ideas that people like that are embedded in the movement, what's the vision that the D.S.A. is driving toward so that people can maybe understand a little better as they consider D.S.A. candidates?
So it's the democratic kind. I mean, there's a reason that we emphasize the democratic in democratic socialism. You know, we are being elected by our voters. The thing that is making democratic socialism popular is people are coming out to vote for democratic socialists. And it is that process. It is the fact that, you know, for example, an organization like D.S.A., which has over 120,000 members now, the largest socialist organization in United States history, a lot of policies and ideas and work gets done by not just members, but people deciding things democratically. And so, you know, what we're hoping to do is create an economy and a society in which more people get to have more say over a lot of those things, so that we have a much stronger presence of the union movement, and that union movement has more democratic control over their workplaces. Where we have a healthcare system that is subject to public accountability, where we have social housing. Again, this is something that is common in a lot of parts of the United States. Montgomery County, Maryland, was recently adopted a social housing authority. It was first proposed. Social housing was the vision that before the creation of the public housing system in the United States. This is, again, part of American history. It would be false to say that we have a complete vision of what this is going to look like. That's subject to a lot of different changes and a lot of democratic decision making. And that's what makes it fundamentally a collective proposition, that what makes it subject to popular decision making. That's why people are excited about it, frankly.
Yeah, let me remind you of our question of today. What do you think about the rise of democratic socialists? Will it ultimately help or hurt the Democratic Party? The number is 888-477-9499. The email is studio2@whyy.org. And for our YouTube and Facebookers, you can keep leaving those comments in the chat. Jessica says, lifetime Democratic voter and activist who will stay home if it's a D.S.A. candidate. They peddle in anti-Semitic tropes that have nothing to do with Gaza or Israel, and it's repulsive, especially being on a stage with Hassan Piker. You know, and let me also bring in a caller who feels just the opposite. Adonis from New York is on the line. Adonis, you're on Studio 2. What's your question or comment?
Hi, Sherry. Hi, Avi. I wanted to mention the comment or the interview that Josh Shapiro had on CNN, and he had spoke out against the D.S.A. and said that he doesn't share things in common with Daria Lisa, who just won the primary in New York. And I think that's an example of how the Democrats are going to bring their own demise, because they are just going against the people's wishes. They're not answering to the people, and they haven't been, which led to Trump winning, because they continue to capitulate and not be for the people, but for the super PACs. And I think it's just going to start off a path of Pennsylvania heading towards the D.S.A. wave, just with Chris Rabb and whatnot. Well, Chris Rabb also endorsed Daria Lisa, so for Josh Shapiro to say that, and Philadelphia has just won a primary with a D.S.A. candidate, is just very telling, and goes to show that what the elections will look like in Pennsylvania in the coming years.
Thank you so much. That's Adonis from New York. And so, Nikhil, and I'd love to get Matt's take on this as well. how do you sort of bring the two factions together? Because at the end of the day, the D.S.A. and centrist Democrats all want to win. They want the Democratic Party to win in November, right? They want to take back power in the House and in the Senate and in local governments. And so how do you sort of deal with this idea? One of our commenters said they don't like the anti-Semitic comments. They view some of what the D.S.A. has to say on one side, but then there's other folks, like you just heard Adonis on the call, doesn't like the centrist views and the attacks you're seeing within the party. How do you sort of forge a way ahead and create a more unified front so that there can be wins in November, Nikhil?
We need to find solutions that speak to the real material needs of working class people. I think messaging came up earlier. This is not a messaging problem. This is a policies and politics problem where we have to find out what the major crises that people are facing. It was a Democratic Socialist running for mayor who first, in New York, who first zeroed in on the concept of affordability before it became a major Democratic talking point in districts across the country and in critical races where people recognize that the cost of living crisis is what is driving so many people to leave the Democratic Party or to vote for other candidates. And so if we can address that, if we can address the issue of housing, which is one of the top issues that my constituents come to me about and to many of my colleagues about, if we can address the issue of energy prices and AI, if we can address the issue indeed of the grave crisis of rising anti-Semitism, of rising Islamophobia, of the hatred that so many people are experiencing in their lives, we have to face these issues head on. I don't think that the way to do that is by fighting for a Democratic majority this fall. That's what I'm focused on. I don't think the way to do that is by publishing op-eds, frankly, that are about how we're going to fight the D.S.A. I'm not focused on that. I'm fighting on winning.
Yeah, and Matt, I want you to respond to that specifically because at the end of the day, Democrats have to work together to win. There are people who won these primaries. At the end of the day, you want them to win. So how do you sort of forge this, come together so that in November there is a win?
Well, let's just be clear about something. I am called a sellout, a Democrat in name only, a corporatist on social media multiple times every single day by people on the left. So I think it's a bit rich to just blame us for being the divisive ones. Moreover, if you look at the rhetoric that not Nikhil is, in this interview, and I trust in general, is much more accommodating. But I think there's a lot of members of the D.S.A. that are not, and that are extraordinarily interested in throwing people like me out of the party. So this is going to be, it is healthy to have debates inside the party and to have fights inside the party. And as we enter the 2028 primary season, we're going to have a big fight for the future of the Democratic Party. I fundamentally do not believe that Democrats ought to be nominating people that attended a rally on October 8th in support of Hamas, which is what Daria Eliza did. I don't believe that we should be nominating people that think we should let murderers and rapists out of jail. I don't believe that we should be nominating people that are saying that we should get rid of our borders. These are the kinds of things that lead to MAGA majorities, that lead to people like Donald Trump winning. And that is deeply, deeply dangerous for the future of the United States. If we continue to lose to these people, we are in deep trouble. And there's just a very, very fundamental divide in our party about how best to take them on. And I think, I have no beef at all with liberal democratic ideas like the ones that Nikhil has been talking about today. Those are completely fine. But when we get into the ideas that he has not touched on, that are in the D.S.A. platform, that some of his D.S.A. colleagues who are running for high office have espoused, that's where things get really bad.
Well, we do have to leave it there. That's the end of the hour. We could have done another one on it, but that's Matt Bennett, co-founder, executive vice president of public affairs for Third Way. Thank you, Matt, for your time today, and thank you, Nikhil Sawal, Pennsylvania State Senator representing the 1st District right here in Philadelphia. Appreciate you both being on the program today. Perhaps we'll do it again.
Yes. And of course, we got to thank Joanne and Carl, who we didn't get to, who was on the line. And I have to thank our producers, Debbie Builder, Hazel May Bryan, for producing today's show. Also, Al Banks engineered today's show. Who? I think it was Tina Calican, who was our visual producer.
We're going
executive
live
producer
on this one.
is
Ben
Kevin
Abrams.
McCoy.
Ben Abrams.
Oh, Ben Abrams, our newest producer. By the way, I'm Cherry Gregg here at WHYY in Philadelphia.
I'm Avi Wolfman-Arent, and our producers are great. They really tested us there at the end of that show.
did.
Good job. And we'll be back tomorrow on Studio 2. Team USA has a big round of 16 match tonight against Belgium in the World Cup. Win or lose, could this tournament be a watershed moment for American soccer fans? And what about the politics surrounding FIFA, President Trump, the revocation of this controversial red card? We're going to talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll unpack it all here tomorrow at noon. Coming up next on WHYY, we have Here and Now. Go USA.
Indeed. Boo waffles. But